All right, great.
Welcome, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the 2024 Democracy Summit. Do you want me to stand over here?
Wherever you want to stand.
Okay, so you are at the session called Engaging Rural Voices in Democracy. I'm supposed to do introductions, but a colleague of mine that shall remain nameless suggested that each of us introduce ourselves. My name is Willie Wilkins. I'm a Mountain Region Specialist doing community and economic development. So I'm going to get us started with our agenda, and then I will hand it off to either Patty or Don. I'm not sure which one yet. So we'll be talking about bridging campus to community, what those resources look like, specialists in the field working with on-campus folk and trying to connect the people, the community to those resources. Today's agenda, it's not moving forward there. Yep.
Not big. Let's see. Maybe when I turn
Technical
the video on.
difficulties, folks.
Well,
Sorry.
figure that out. Why don't we introduce ourselves?
Yeah.
So, hi everyone, I'm so glad you all
from
today.
here.
Thanks for coming here and choosing to spend some of your time
Yep.
with us today on what I think is a really important topic. My name is Patty Schmidt. I'm the Community Development Director for the Office of Engagement and Extension here at Colorado State University, and work to support bringing more people who are impacted by issues in our state into the conversations to strategize how we can address those in ways that are impactful for more people.
And I'm Bob Gumany. I'm a professor over in agricultural and resource economics, co-lead the Regional Economic Development Institute, which led me into the role of now being part of the leadership team for our broad extension programming and community and economic development. And with rural initiative investments that the state has made that are wrapping up this year, we were able to expand what we're doing, and that's a lot of which I'll be hearing about today. So we helped frame some of that, and now want to make sure the campus is aware there's lots more ways to engage with the field than there used to be, including.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Katie Noblock. I'm an associate director of the Center for Public Deliberation, and I've gotten the real great privilege to work with the folks in Extension on the Rural Action Project. I'll talk to you more about it later, but it's basically a program where we're going out into rural communities and helping kind of create belonging, but also opportunities for collective action projects. So a really kind of community building work together that I'll be able to explain a little bit later.
Great. Thank you, guys. So our agenda will include the why of our work. So why we're doing it and a little bit of the how. The CSU Rural Engagement Initiative, or the Rural Initiative, as I call it, supporting community-driven work and its connection to democracy. The Rural Action Project, as Katie mentioned, working with community. So that will be my bit and kind of the work that specialists are doing across the state within their regions and their communities. Don's going to talk about Ready, and then we'll do a question and answer section after Don's piece. So I think I'm going to hand it off to Don or Patty for the why rule. Whoever wants to do that piece.
We can tag team it. Don and I, so we're both, we direct the community and economic development work that we spearhead around the state. So we're pretty used to working well together and building off of the different things that each of us focus on when we're working in local communities. So a lot of people ask, why would we want to focus on rural areas? Why are people in the state of Colorado and why are people around the country thinking about how do we support thriving rural areas? And we love to point out that it's important to understand that in the state of Colorado, we have 64 counties. And of those counties, 47 of those counties are rural areas. That's a majority of the counties we have now, not the majority of the population, but it's really important to think about how do we support those counties to thrive and how do we bridge the resources and the people and the assets that Colorado State University has to support thriving in those rural areas. We are a land grant university with a mission to be partners to local communities. And that's why we make sure that we provide that kind of resource to rural spaces. So rural communities have assets and they have opportunities, right? Some of the greatest health disparities we see around the country are impacting our rural areas. We are seeing a lot of our health providers leaving rural spaces. And so it takes for those kind of wicked
adaptive challenges. It takes a group of people working together to think about regional models or different ways that we can attract health providers to be in local spaces in rural areas to meet the needs that rural areas have in the health and well-being arena. Additionally, some of the fastest rates since COVID that we've seen of social isolation have been in rural spaces. So social isolation, we're really beginning to understand the deep impacts that has on people, from, higher rates of heart attacks, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of dementia. And so we're just beginning to really understand why, as a country, we need to better respond to social isolation. And so those are some of the opportunities that we focus on out in rural communities. Willie's going to talk a little more about it, but there's also a lot of really great things happening in rural areas. There's deeper connections among the community members in rural areas. It's not uncommon for rural folks to know each other and to know who to go to when they need something, or there's a question, or there's something that needs to happen. A lot of folks really know each other. And I think that uniqueness was what was attractive for many people who began to move to rural places, especially during COVID. Additionally, despite what we see in the media about rural areas being stagnant, they're actually growing, just not at the same rate as our urban areas. So one of the unique things we see nationwide, and actually as a reality in Colorado as well, is that a lot of that growth is due to our attracting immigrant populations to go into those spaces. So a unique asset to see different cultures, different languages, mixing and coming and being a part of these rural areas. And so there's these opportunities to think about, what does it mean to be a rural space in the future? We know what it is now, so what do we want that to look like in the future? And then one last thing I'll mention is that, innovation is not unique to suburban and urban areas. Innovation happens in rural spaces as well. You just need to look at some of the examples of regenerative agricultural practices in which farmers are really being innovative in thinking about how climate is impacting their farm practices and how they can be innovative in responding to those changes in order to increase their profits from doing different and new practices. So 3 years ago, the CSU Board of Governors wanted to invest more in connecting the resources and assets we had at Colorado State University and really focus on rural spaces in Colorado, making sure that we didn't lose that connection, that historical connection that we had for rural communities. And they picked 4 key areas from areas that they heard from community members from around the state that said, we need more of this work and we need CSU to show up in these spaces for us. Those 4 areas were accessible education, improved health, thriving economy, and vibrant communities. The vibrant communities piece of that is really focused on what we'll be talking about today, as well as our thriving economy areas. And now I'm going to hand it off to Willie. I can do this one. So I mentioned before that I'm the Community Development Director for the Office of Engagement and Extension. And basically what that is me showing up into spaces and working with all the extension folks that we have around the state to think about, how do we bring more people power to our grandest challenges? So in the work that we do in extension, we try to be a resource as an asset for many different areas, but along the thread that goes across all the areas that we show up in is, how do we support people? Because you can't take the people out of the challenges and the opportunities that you have in communities. And it's a lot of really great work happening around the state. Have you all heard of engagement and extension? Do you know what do you think of when you think of extension? You don't have to raise your hand, just yell it out. A 4-H kid, right? So youth development is one of the key areas that we do, right? Because people think of 4-H. Anything else that you can think of? Leadership development, thanks. Yeah, that's something
You
that
make
I
our
work.
bosses very happy.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great work. We have offices in almost every county in the state of Colorado. And the folks out in the field who are doing a lot of really great work try to show up and be that nonpartisan, trusted partner that can, show up and connect to the resources we have, but also they live in the community, they're a part of the community, and they have a vested interest in making sure that the communities thrive. So I mentioned this already that, we are facing various challenges in the state of Colorado, and that is not unique to the Front Range. We're seeing it all over the state. And in order to respond to these unique challenges, we need to figure out better systems of collaboration. So if you think about democracy and living in a democratic system, we have to think what's key to living in a democratic system is thinking about how do we work together. And so have you all ever seen like a city and county government organizational chart? Has anybody seen that? I'm the only nerd that likes to look at those.
Four columns is gnarly.
4 columns, this is gnarly, but who's at the top of the organizational chart? Mayor, city manager? Would it surprise you? It actually is the community members. So if you go look at those organizational charts, a lot of times what you'll see is most cities and counties have the people who live there at the top of the organizational chart. That's the basis of our democracy, right? Like we need to be run by our people. We need to be driven by our people. And there's a lot of science that says why that's so important for us to do, because the strategies and the programs we choose to use to address these types of issues are more effective long-term and sustainable when we're working with the people who are most impacted. The challenge is that we often see that we're missing folks to be involved in what's happening in the local community. And why that's challenging is that we can get people to show up who are elected to deal with the challenges. Typically, we can get people who are paid to show up for the challenges, but when you're asking for community members to get involved and be involved in the solution making, we're not as good at doing that. So when you think about that connection to our democratic systems, then what do we need to do so more people feel equipped to be involved in their community? At Engagement and Extension, we like to think of 2 types of expertise. We think of the content experts, so these people are the researchers, the paid professionals who are really tasked to focus on things. And then we also think about the context experts. These are the people who have lived experience with the issue at hand that you're trying to explore. We would argue that you need both experts as a part of the solution-making process in order to have more effective ways to strategize around issues. And what you see when you are good at getting people involved, especially folks who have either been historically left out of conversations or who are most impacted by the issue, is that you see a ripple effect of impacts for communities. So we have people at the top of the organizational chart. Well, when you have high rates of civic engagement, there's all kinds of health benefits, individual and community level benefits for communities that have higher rates of civic engagement. Oh, and look at that. I had a chart just to show you in case you doubted me that the people, community members were at the top. So, we're here today to talk about rural voices and getting more people involved in rural places. And we're talking a lot about civic capacity building. My friends call me out when I use civic capacity building all the time. They're like, what really are you talking about? And so I always like to point out civic capacity building is just making sure that communities know how to learn, plan, and act together. How are we working together across sectors, across difference, to make sure that our levels of civic capacity are strong? So what will it take to increase civic capacity? And I'm just, as soon as you all want to yank me out, just please do yank me out.
Elaborate. When you get to that slide, that's when I'm taking over.
Thank you. We're not a well-tuned dance, if you can't tell. So what does it take to increase civic capacity or collaboration within communities? One of the things it takes is investment. So you need to invest in thinking about how you build economically viable and resilient communities. You need to invest in civic capacity building, invest in making sure people feel like they're equipped with the skills and the tools they need to feel like they can fully participate in your democratic systems. And then thirdly, you need to enhance your community decision-making and governance process to make sure that people are informing you and partnering with you to choose the strategies and the ways you want to grow your community. One of the ways that we do that programmatically here at Colorado State University is with the Family Leadership Training Institute program. This is a program that we have around the state of Colorado that's focused on getting people who've been historically left out of decision-making processes and providing with a no-cost leadership training that focuses on breaking down any kind of barriers to understanding how you can get involved in civic systems. We've had this program in our state for almost 50 years. That's not true. But would be impressive, 15 years. And there's many partners around the state who make this program happen. And we couldn't be happier with the results that we've seen and the number of folks who have graduated from this 20-week program. While anybody who applies to the program, once accepted, they do not have to pay to go through the program. Everybody gets 100% scholarship. And while the program is open to anybody who would like to take the class, it actually, we have a really great track record of making sure that we're getting at the audiences who either haven't had a lot of opportunities for advancing their education, folks, you know, from the BIPOC community who haven't been represented and are not represented in elected positions as much as other groups in our community. So really looking at the people who aren't tending to be involved in the state of Colorado right now and making sure that they have access to education that really advances their leadership skills and how they want to be involved in communities. And since we started this program in the state of Colorado in partnership with a national organization called the National Parent Leadership Institute, we've been evaluating the impact of this training in the state of Colorado and just see really huge increases in civic knowledge for people who go through the program. I will say that it was about 12 years ago that I went through the program, and I haven't ever gone away from it. It was a very impactful program. It was a beautiful way to think about how we do systems change and how we build systems of collaboration. And just, it's a powerful opportunity for folks who are local in Larimer County at Fort Collins. We do have a class in the Fort Collins area, so I would encourage you to check it out if you wanted to go through it. And with the help of a faculty member here at campus, David McPhee, we've been able to, you know, see the impact of the program up to 5 years after graduating from the program. And just in comparing rates of civic engagement from folks who've never gone through a like program to folks who've graduated from our program up to 5 years later, we've been able to demonstrate that 96% of our graduates stay engaged within their community. The final thing I'll just mention, you know, in relation to the work that we are doing here at Colorado State University is, so civic capacity building is important, right? It's the foundation of our democratic systems. How are people involved? How are we making sure we're investing in getting people involved and more voices involved? And that's not just diverse voices based on culture. It's also, how are we making sure there's avenues for our rural voices to be involved in the policy making that's happening? Well, one of the unique things that we were able to compare data in the last couple of years because of the pandemic was looking at the connection between civic capacity and resilience. And there there's been some research done with myself, David McPhee, and a national leadership expert, David Crislip, where we utilized a civic capacity index tool to compare how communities in the state of Colorado responded to what levels of civic capacity they had. And we're able to use data from the CDC on how counties across the country responded to COVID. So they were looking at death rates, they were looking at infection rates, and we were able in Colorado to compare the civic capacity of communities to the response rates or resilience that communities showed during their response to COVID. And what we found was really stark. What we found is there is a connection between strong civic capacity and how effective communities are to collaborate when you have these grander, bigger challenges, right? It makes sense. If you have more connected communities where people are talking across systems, across sectors, you would think intuitively they're going to work better, going to work more together when they're responding to a challenge like COVID. But not only did we find that their response rates were faster and that they were more effective in responding to the needs of the different impacts of COVID, but what we also found is the communities that had higher rates of civic capacity saw lower rates of death. They saw lower rates of infection as well. And so when you're thinking about investing in civic capacity, investing in leadership development, it's so important to not only think about that as the feel-good thing we do because we're based on being a democracy, but really understanding that when we work more effectively together, we're actually saving lives. And it's a vital part of how we work together and what we focus on in building those things together.
What is CCI is that? Community capacity
Thank you.
index, kind of stuff I have no idea.
Yeah, that comes from my colleague, David McPhee.
It's an indicator, it's an
Yes.
index.
Great. I'll turn it over to Willie.
An example of collaboration, as Don pointed out. And just to toot Patty's horn really quick, and that it relates to democracy. Yesterday, they took 100 FLTI members to the state capitol, did a state capitol visit, got to watch a bill or two be talked about and implemented, as well as what was the interview they were doing? What was that about? You mentioned it last night.
Yeah, so we heard from the Colorado State Attorney General, Phil Weiser was at the event and spoke to folks from around the state. And then as well, they were able to attend the press conference around CCAP. So childcare is a huge need that impacts families and impacts different economies around the country or around the state. So they were able to do that. So I'm actually going to leave. I was going to try to sneak out. But you said that'd be weird. I'll have another presentation. Thank you all so much. They have my contact information, but thanks for the opportunity to chat with you all.
So I'm gonna bumble through Patty's, the rest of her slides, and then I'll pass it on to Katie here briefly, but we'll talk about why leadership development. And I think Patty touched on this. When you're talking leadership and when it's needed in rural communities, 1 in 8 people need to step up. And this came from Ben Winchester, who did some quantitative data around leadership development. But you need 1 in 8 people to step up in rural communities, opposed to 1 in 33 stepping up. And something came up last week when we were at the conference in Durango, which is and this relates to this, you can have 100 people at a meeting and that's fantastic. But if those 100 people are the same 100 people or a very homogenous group, that isn't so effective. But if you got 8 people at the table with, a range of diversity in that group, that's when you're going to see effective leadership development. So definition of economic and community development. And I rattle this off because it's my title as I'm a community economic development professional. People look at me and they're like, what is that? So we try to nail down, some kind of definition for both. There is no agreed upon definition. Well-being, wealth creation are often used. Usually easier to define the work that we're doing in the community rather than what we are doing in the community, if that makes sense. Economic development is generally associated with growth. Community development is generally associated with development and working to include more voices. So both sustainability as well as that piece that Patty was talking about, where you need more people at the table and you're going to have a more vibrant community when you've got diverse voices. So growth is a measure of numbers going up or down, employment, GDP goals, and then development being sustainable use of resources and engagement with stakeholders or in stakeholders. So this one is just showing, you've got economic development, community development, they're working together, but you've got to have this foundation. And again, to Patty's point, which is leadership, civic development, you've got to start there. That's your base, your foundation, and then knowing the role of public policy. Then you can start to build out what the rest of that looks like. So education, workforce development, infrastructure development, communities, quality of life, and then you move up into existing business development, innovations, entrepreneurship, as well as recruiting. So you got to have that base in order to get to that apex. Patty talked about the Family Leadership Training Institute, building on civic capacity, civic education. I'll talk a little bit about the Civic Learning Labs. They're a shortened version of kind of the FLTI programming, but it's designed to kind of tackle, some of the issues that are happening where people don't have 20 weeks. They don't have the time to go attend, a 20-week course, but they can go do 10 weeks and talk about some of the issues that are prominent within their areas. So mobile home park preservation. I don't know if you guys have notice there's a housing issue in the state of Colorado, and one of the few affordable housing options left across the state are mobile homes. So they've got advocacy, leadership development going around this issue because there's a water issue. There's, people living in places that may not be taken well care of. So you need advocacy to promote the mobile home park preservation because they're a big asset across the state of Colorado. Food insecurity, again, Colorado is this great state, but there's lots of mountain towns, lots of towns in Colorado that are food deserts. You can go to downtown Denver, you can go to Park County, and that's going to be an issue with both food security and, accessibility. So understanding food systems, advocacy around that work, and public speaking, which is everybody's favorite, right? And then youth leadership development. It's important to have youth learn the skills, again, to be able to do public speaking, leadership, civic engagement, and communication skills. So those are all examples of civic learning labs they've done across the state of Colorado. Building civic capacity and belonging. So, when you talk about folk that are in those leadership roles in the government, county commissioners, they want to come in and they want to do a community conversation. They want to talk to people about how they can best serve them, right? That's where they want to start, but you can't start at the top. You've got to build relationships. You got to have trust. So I think that's why Patty pointed out the top of those organizational charts, they're us, the people. And so you've got to build trust and relationship in order to then get to the training, tools, engagement, and then hosting and having community conversations. And Katie will spend quite a few, we'll be talking about the Rural Action Project. So there's a great transition into how you have those community conversations.
Excellent. Thanks, Willie.
Yeah.
All right. So like Willie said, I'm going to be talking about the Rural Action Project. So we've kind of been talking at a high level about what we want to be doing in communities. Now we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into one of the, oh, my battery's running though, into one of the specific programs that we're running right now. So we are in the second year of the Rural Action Project. It is funded through CSU's Rural Initiative, and it's a partnership between the Office of Engagement and Extension, the Center for Public Deliberation, with which I work, and rural communities from across the state. And basically the goal of the project, like I said earlier, is to both develop and strengthen community connections, but also increase communities' capacities to work together to actually get things done. And through that work, to continue to develop communities' connections and capacity for more training. For more work. Okay, so how does it actually work in practice? It's a year-long program. So in the fall, we have opened up our host recruitment. So our extension agents are going out, our extension faculty, excuse me, are going out into the field. They're talking with their nonprofit partners, they're talking with their city partners, their community partners, and they're trying to find communities that are interested in running this program. They apply, we've accepted like 10 to 9 each year. In the winter, we run them through a training program. This year, we ran an in-person training at Spur, our Denver campus. We bring all of our community leaders together and we train them in kind of some really basic community engagement work, but also how do you facilitate conversations that bring community members together across difference? And how do you help them understand how to make a collective decision that's going to have an impact on their community? In the spring, they actually host their own community conversations. This has changed between years, so I'll give you an overview of what we did this year. But the first 2 meetings, it's 4 meetings, and we design a meeting in a box for them. The first 2 meetings are really focused on creating a sense of community belonging. So we do community storytelling, we do asset identification, we identify community values. This is really the place where folks get to know one another, start rewriting the narrative of our rural communities, right? Often we have a narrative of what our community looks like that isn't necessarily rooted in our contemporary realities. So this is a space for communities to come together and say, this is who we are now. These are our assets. This is what we value. This is who we want to become as a community. The second 2 meetings are then focused exclusively on choosing and designing a community project. So they, talk about the issues that are important to their community. They winnow those issues down. They brainstorm ideas about work that they might do together. And then in their last meeting, they're really spending their time kind of saying, what does our budget need to be? What are the steps? What's the timeline for getting this work done? Then they apply for, and every community gets, a $5,000 mini grant to implement their community project. And they tend to implement those over the summer. So to help facilitate this, we produce kind of a lot of training materials for them. We give them a lot of resources to help them do the work. So we help them recruit out in their communities. We really try to help them think about the different stakeholders in their community, establishing connections in their community, and reaching out to those folks who might not normally be involved in the conversations. We also provide probably too detailed of a meeting agenda where we say, here are the steps that you need to go through from A to Z to get these meetings done, trying to stress as much as possible to those communities. At the end of the day, this is your community and your meeting. So adapt this in ways that make sense for y'all. If you need to cut a section, if you need to change a section, whatever works, but we want you to have the conversation that works for your community. And then we provide worksheets, note-taking documents, surveys, things that allow communities to gather data during the meetings so that the talk doesn't just die at the table, but we collect information from those conversations so that they can understand their community better, but also have a deeper sense of what's driving this community project and what do our communities expect out of this project? What do they want it to look like? We also hope that that data is valuable for community leaders beyond the scope of the program, right? When communities are identifying their values, assets, and needs, that's important information for community leaders to know so that when they are making public decisions, they can align with those community values and needs. Okay, so these are our host organizations across the last 2 years. The orange ones are from last year. And the blue ones are from this year. So our blue ones are in the process right now. Their grant applications were due on Friday. I have not seen today. Tomorrow. I was like, I haven't seen all of them. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, they're due tomorrow. So I've seen a few of them, but all of the orange sites have already completed their projects. And you'll see we've got repeat sites in Morgan County and Sterling. A lot of our community, some of our community partners are basically the FLTI program that Patty was talking about. So it's a really interesting ways that we're kind of seeing our collaborations connecting across different spaces and communities. Other times we're working with local nonprofits, city officials. We have, this year we have 2 youth programs. One is a 4-H group in Teller County. So lots of different types of organizations engaging in this program with us. Okay, so I'm going to give you now an overview of some of our year 1 outcomes. And I'm excited because this is the first time I'm actually publicly presenting on this data. Over 225 people participated in 10 rural communities during the first year. And we estimate that over half of them have English as their second language, predominantly Spanish speakers. And we utilize the language justice model at the events. I'm going to back up and say the first year they were all happening at the same time. So there was like translation happening on our end because there was a virtual portion. We got rid of that the second year, but we still encourage them to do the language justice model. If you're not familiar with the language justice model, it basically means that everyone at the table has an interpretation headset, and they are all being interpreted simultaneously. So that not only our Spanish speakers are sitting there with their headset, but our English speakers are sitting there with their headset too. And everything's getting interpreted simultaneously so that folks can more equitably participate in the conversation. And like I said, last year we had 9 communities implementing public projects. I'll talk a little bit more about them in the future. And there were ripple effects out in the community, right? So the projects didn't just stop when the funding stopped. There were lots of things that kind of kept going after the projects. Continuing on that year 1 data, who showed up? I will say that this is very kind of piloty preliminary data. One of the things that we learned about rural communities in year 1 is that they don't particularly like to do homework. So we are thinking about ways to make our research feel less like homework. But this is primarily from 2 of our biggest meetings. We got a bunch of surveys from them. So folks took a survey at the beginning of the meetings, and then they took one at the end of the meetings. We are about 50-50 white, Hispanic, or Latin, 3% more than one race, 3% as identifying as other races, Black or African American, Native American, or Asian American. We have pretty good diversity by age. Oh, my last category didn't end up on there. But you can see it's kind of split, right? Often we'll see folks ending up at the higher end of the age scale for folks who are showing up to these types of meetings. We have a pretty good representation. I expect that this year's number is actually going to be even better because we have so many youth cohorts. We did have a predominantly women participate in the conversation, which is something that I want to kind of invest in thinking about further. I think part of that actually might have been our partnerships with FLTI, which has a lot of women participating in that program. Some more thinking about who showed up. This is our split by education. So 4% some high school, 12% had high school graduate or GED, 30%, 34% some college, 30% bachelor's degree, 20% postgraduate, right? So we're trending a little bit higher in terms of education, but still we're doing some pretty good job at representation. And then ideology, this is a place where I'm pretty proud of our results. We're pretty much split 1/3 across, more representation by liberals. That's somewhat to be expected. I think in these types of engagement, that's a pretty normal outcome for liberals to be more willing to participate in some of this work. I'm happy to talk more about that later. But we ended up having fairly diverse representation in terms of ideology. This is my favorite slide, and this is where they say, how did the conversations go? So what happened to you during these conversations? Did you like them? 85 of our participants thought the conversations were relevant to their lives. And I'll say that the folks who are falling outside of these are very rarely saying like, this wasn't relevant. Mostly it's kind of like, I don't know, it was fine, right? Every single participant said that they often or almost always felt respected by both their facilitators and by their fellow participants. 97% of participants said they learned something new about their communities. 80%, so 4 in 5, said that they considered perspectives across difference. This is really one of our main goals of this program, is that folks are looking at each other across difference and learning to understand each other and learning to talk and make decisions together. 50% of the people in rural communities met new people at these events, and 85% left the conversations feeling more motivated to take action on the important issues facing their communities. All right, so what did they actually do? These are just some of the things that we saw coming out of the first year projects. In Sterling, they hosted their first Cinco de Mayo celebration. There actually was a college who had been trying to put on a Cinco de Mayo celebration a few years prior, didn't have great attendance. So this was the first community-wide one. They had over 700 participants coming to their Cinco de Mayo celebration. In Lamar, they did some intergenerational storytelling events. They're producing some social media stories about the narratives that are coming out of their communities. In San Luis, they built a traditional adobe oven to use at community events for their community center. In Garfield, they held many health fairs for the Spanish-speaking population who was having trouble accessing health resources other ways. And in Morfino County, they started to develop a food forest, planting planting fruit trees that they hope kind of live long beyond the scopes of the program. So these are just some of the things that we see coming out of the Rural Action Project. And I'm going to stick on Sterling for just a second, because this is a great place to think about the ripple effects, right? At the Sterling Cinco de Mayo celebration, they asked folks in the community to kind of act as vendors. So come and your small business can be a food vendor at this event. There were a few folks who ended up getting their small business license as a result of participating in that event. There are all sorts of ripple things that are happening. In Morphinell County, this work led to another $10,000 grant for another community need, right? So there are all sorts of ways, just by bringing people together and saying, you are capable of doing this work in your own communities, them gaining that agency and power to keep it going and keep moving beyond. All right, if you're, oops, I don't know what happened just there. If you are interested in getting involved in the Rural Action Project, if you are a researcher here on campus, please get in touch. If we are really interested in kind of, as communities develop their community projects, connecting to researchers to see if there's ways to evaluate those programs or to consult on those programs to bring the best practices that we're developing at CSU out into the rural communities. If you know students, we run several courses through the Center for Public Deliberation. We've got 2 running in the fall, one focused on deliberative practices, one focusing on a program that Dave McIver and I actually developed several years ago, running high school civic engagement programs. And then there are lots of more opportunities to connect with us. So we're going to be doing an open house today until 3 p.m. in the Never Know Summer Room. And then there's a Democracy Expo tomorrow if you want to keep talking about those things. Okay. I am now going to turn it back over to Willie to talk about working with communities.
All right. And really quickly to Katie's point, that event in Sterling will now continue in perpetuity. They're going to continue to do this Cinco de Mayo celebration without Rural Action Project funds, without any involvement by CSU, just a project that's going to continue to go. So I wanted to mention that. You saw this slide. I'm going to give you a different version of that, which is this. So we kind of shifted just the names and not what we're doing, but we've got the community economic development, which is kind of that vibrant communities, thriving economies piece. We've got improved and behavioral health specialists. So you've got the original kind of behavioral health specialists for each of the counties. They've also had an agribility piece where they've added behavioral health specialists across the state of Colorado to help ag producers with a variety of health and wellness strategies, suicide prevention, helping with disabilities and farms and agriculture. So that piece is embedded in that one as well. Agricultural and food systems, that was kind of part of the thriving economies piece, but it's ag and food systems with specialists across the state doing that work, and then accessible education. And so I'm going to share a little bit of what each of those areas are doing across the state. Here's the regional map, and it aligns with the CCI map, so the county commissioner maps basically. And this is showing that we have regional specialists in the eastern region, southern region, western region, and then my favorite, the mountain region, which is mine. The Front Range was kind of left out of the rural initiative piece, but we now have specialists that will be working in all 5 of these regions doing the work that I just showed you. So that's just to give you guys context of where we're doing work and who's where. So Colorado communities, strengths, community resilience, which Patty touched on. Basically, people working together during challenges, adversity. You need a resilient community to kind of work through those spaces. Natural beauty, we all know Colorado's got beautiful mountains, beautiful ag lands, places that people can get out and foster a sense of belonging and pride. Cultural heritage, absolutely rich traditions, local festivals, Cinco de Mayo being one example, historical landmarks that bind the communities together. Youth engagement, someone said 4-H earlier, and I think I might have said it myself. Youth actively participate in community events. Some of the challenges, and I'm speaking kind of in a personal sense, there's divisiveness in communities that's not just politics or socioeconomic. Geography plays a big piece. I work in, several counties where you either have a mountain pass to get over to the other community, you have a big ski hub, and then an ag on the other side. And so there's like this division of both geography as well as, politics and economics and inequity being a piece of that as well. So working through those challenges as specialists, access and availability to education, mental and physical health resources, childcare, which is a big issue across the state of Colorado, and people being able to work and support their children as well. Affordable housing, livable wages, we all know those are big issues in the state. Workforce development, leadership training, civic engagement. So these are challenges. Also, these are opportunities. These are spaces where we are doing some work, and you'll get to see some more of that. Economic diversification, an opportunity for communities, rural communities specifically. So how do you encourage, other things that aren't kind of the major traditional industries such as ag and mining? How do you invest in technology, tourism, outdoor rec, small business development, incubators, entrepreneurship, education and skill development? So tying into that challenge is also an opportunity for us to create spaces for youth to learn as well as adults, foster mentorship programs, vocational training, access to higher education, collaboration, again, working across disciplines, working across those divides in the state, working together to better address community needs, and then community connection. So people who feel connected will, in a sense of belonging, will work together and thrive and grow. So Bill Schuster, who works out of the business college, went back to his hometown, won't tell you what the name of that town was, and felt a disconnect. He felt like it felt like a place instead of a community. So I think that's what we're striving for, doing the work we're doing, is to create a space that feels like a community, collaborative, thriving, etc. So I'm going to share some of the work that all 5 of those areas are doing across the state. College Connection was put together by a mountain region specialist. Basically, it's a webinar that's providing information about majors, minors, scholarships, student clubs, organizations, and then opportunities for undergraduate research. Each webinar is recorded, posted to YouTube, so students can go back, look at those later, parents, counselors, etc. Collaboration with Migrant Education Program. So Socorro Mosqueda and CSU put together a camp to bring together resources for migrant workers and underserved populations, and this was in the Eastern region. 46th annual CSU Math Day, 27 Sterling High School students attended, participated in a personalized tour, and then also got to eat at the Laurie Student Center. Then engaging it with tribal communities, this work happened over in the western part of the state, in the Four Corners area to be specific. Worked with the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, hosted an Indigenous Science, Technology, Arts, and Resilience Camp, delivering programming to 31 students that was put on by Indigenous students. And then outreach engagement in the southern region. 600 high school students were engaged, 15 counties, and over 30 schools. Agriculture and food systems. Derek, who's part of the Ag and Food, he facilitated a Rural Action Project conversation at Rockledge Ranch, which is a living history museum. They're on the edge of Garden of the Gods. And so one of the projects they're planning on doing is some in the park signage that gets people from the ranch into the park and then back in as well. So Derek's also conducting a forestry academy in Park County that will help educate public land users and private forest landowners on topics such as pest management, watershed protection, and wildfire risk reduction. That's happening this month, I think. I want to say in 2 weeks. Collaborated the regional food bank using commercial dehydrators to help do food preservation over in the western region. And that was part of their regional food bank. They're really impressive. They're ginormous machines and super cool. I got to see them with Nicole when I was over there. San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition. So Stephen Lauer worked with local partners to complete a foods needs assessment, and that was in the southern region. Improved in behavioral health. So I combined the two. They're doing similar work and they do a lot of collaboration together. Eagle, Lake, and Teller counties, Jen put together a program using graphic novels and comics as a unique method of addressing stigma associated with mental health, LGBTQ plus issues, disability, race, ethnicity, identity. She hosted these events at the local libraries. Monthly behavioral health virtual office hours. So once a month, the behavioral health specialists are hosting at 1 hour, so people can call in that be interested in resources, consultations, discussion, or simply ask about issues related to behavioral health. And then finally, the last one, Kirsten did an adventure activity for Northwest 4-H District Seniors, a think tank. 52 students broken into 12 different teams, exploring 7 indicators of thriving. So she basically tricked the students into kind of talking about issues they wouldn't normally be open to discussing with themselves and with adults. And some of those included hopeful purpose, positive emotionality, personal responsibility. I think we can all use some of those talks. And then finally, community and economic development, which is, you know, my range and where I am most familiar with the work. So Clear Creek County, I got connected with the county manager there, and Patty had mentioned there are several counties that don't have extension in it. Clear Creek County is one of those, but we've worked very closely with the county managers and the commissioners doing some economic diversity work, as well as with Ready. And then also the College of Business. Bill Schuster had a team of 4 students that helped put together a long-term, short-term plan for economic diversity for Clear Creek County. That was presented at their economic summit in February. Providing coaching for entrepreneurs. So Alice collaborating with the Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute to provide training on marketing, business planning, and business model refinement. Jeff over in the Western region, developing and delivering content, a business model canvas for nonprofits, doing one-to-one technical assistance to refine business models, identify and solicit grant funds. And then finally, facilitated wrap conversations. So multiple of us, so Derek, Alice in the Eastern region. I don't know if Jeff did. And then I helped facilitate several of the Rural Action Project conversations. I did the Teller County conversations, and those projects have gone through several talks of reiteration. I was on the phone with Cripple Creek last night, and they're putting together their stuff and supposed to send it to me today to edit. So just some of the stuff that we're doing across all of our sectors. And just here's some quick pictures. This is the summit in Clear Creek County. That's Jen hosting her program over in the mountains. Derek talking about connections and communities, and then a picture from Ruben's project, which was the College Connection. Keep forgetting the name of that one. And finally, what does all of that work have to do with democracy and, you know, why we're here today? And this is, I think, how community and economic development, the context is community economic development work is about empowering individuals and communities to participate in and influence the decisions that impact their lives and their communities. It's about creating a more equitable and sustainable future for all. And now we'll pass it on to Don.
When we're running long, so I might go really brief because we've covered so much and I want to leave time for questions and answers, but just to what has been spoken about so far, part of this is just to expose you all, not just to the principles we all believe in, but to tell you about the portfolio of things that are going on. I've been here since 1997, and this is by far the most opportunities I've ever been able to give students, faculty, colleagues, staff, and communities to actually work together and have the resources to actually support that. Because even though I come from the dismal science of economics, we very much have enjoyed being a partnership with this group, because when economic planning is done from top down, it tends to not go well. And so we've seen the models of economic development really mature into ones where we see better outcomes from groups that actually have community development blended in. That said, though, we still do know there is a science behind how we bring economies forward. And so our center focuses primarily on those economic indicators, but now almost always insists that when we work with communities, that they at least think holistically about how they're bringing communities in those conversations. But if you want to, we have a website now that has a pretty full set of things where you can learn about the data we have available. If you're having to do reports, the projects we're doing, particularly in those Ready reports. And although we're just still starting on these, trying to do a webinar series, but this, for instance, is an example of Ready reports. These are great for 3 reasons. First of all, we have a lot of academics doing super interesting research, going into academic journals and never being read by anybody who doesn't go to academic journals. So now we have about 25 faculty affiliates across campus and student affiliates. And say they write an academic article, a thesis, a dissertation, we challenge them to boil it down to less than 4 pages, heavy on visuals, tables, and graphics, so it's understandable, almost like a USA Today. And we've posted these now for 5 years, so there's quite an accumulation. These are a couple of the examples you'd see. On the student side, it's a great way for them to get a quick hit outreach publication. And sometimes not just the thesis and dissertation. These student interns we're sending out every summer for extension can do one on one of their projects. And third of all, if there is a community out there, perhaps through the Rural Action Project, who wants to just start exploring lightly something that doesn't deserve a full dissertation of research, we've put reports like that together. And the reintroduction of wolves is an example of something we've all heard a lot about in the state. So they almost end up being a little bit of like policy white papers. So again, it's a way to try to democratize economics and both get more of what we're doing on campus able and in the forum to be used by more of the public. And then for people who are light on economics to have a topic with economic interest to it, a way for them to share those programs. So specifically, I thought this was a good place to highlight our extension internship program. We are not the only people who have those. There's about 80 a year going on the ground, but it's a really good example of how our programs have used those internships, and you'll see they're actually scattered for the first time ever. Extensions touching almost every college on campus. Historically, it's only really had staff in 3 or 4. You can see the topic areas are very diverse. So whether you guys are students on campus, staff on campus, or faculty, we're really encouraging people to use these internships as your way to maybe do your first community-based research, and approach us. All of us have hosted them, so we can talk to you about them. But, we went from 11 paid internships the first year of this to, again, we're up in the 80 range now, and that'll continue again this year. I just only had a report through this year. But we're really trying to stretch with it. And in addition to the internships themselves, giving funding to students for a summer where they maybe didn't want to piece together working for fast food or whatever, it's given them great professional development opportunities. We have a poster session. We invite you to join us for that. It'll be September 30th this year in the fall when those students come back from their summers. They make these new mentors. They have both a mentor on campus and a mentor in the community. We give awards to some of those groups. Very much get hands-on work experience and something that'll look really good on the resume. For the ones who come from our space, we offer them up a chance to write up a ready report to have maybe their first baby publication. And then in a few cases, they've actually really led to people landing the jobs that they ended up in, because both undergrads and grads can do these, and some of them are close to being finished. So I think I'm going to stop with that, but I invite you to visit Ready where we have examples. This is one we did with a state park, where again, we try to engage community partners, even though they just wanted an economic impact study. We learned lots more about one of our newest state parks. And then we now also have a regional food business center hosted here, but covering the 6 states you see in the dark green, where the confluence of community, economic development, and food and ag have come together. So we have, like I said, just more opportunities than we've ever had. And this is a way you can connect with that food center and its website if you want to learn more about that. But I'd rather just kind of wrap up and leave us a little bit of time for questions and answers, because we're running a bit long. You've heard us just dump on you all kinds of information, but I hope you do feel like you understand the principles of what we're doing and the portfolio of things you can tap into if you want to start working in this space they've exploded in the last 5 years. So there's no excuse to not work with rural communities if you want to. Let's turn back over to Katie.
Yeah, any question? I'm just gonna be hovering at the Q&A over here, but any questions for any of us, either from the audience here or online? Yes.
Are you very familiar with the state budget, and do they proportionally give to the rural communities, or just most of it to the city?
There's a budget being written up right now. It's been a real point of contention, and we're pretty sure we got the rural initiative money, because there's this continued concern by rural legislatures that even if you couldn't sit there and break down the budget and see where the ripple effects are, the ripple effects have not been making it out to rural Colorado. So they're like, well, what if we plant some people and initiatives in rural communities, and if they ripple back up to the metro area, great, but let's worry about them. Then we don't have to worry about, because that is probably the political issue of of Colorado right now. Every state has rural areas. All of our population growth primarily has driven us to become more and more imbalanced for my 25-year career here. So that's exactly why we think we got the investment at CSU to invest in the rural initiative, is because very much the perception from rural policymakers is that there's a heavy urban bias in almost every policy and budget proposal that's put there. With the exception of DOT. DOT is very careful because actually roads go the other way. We probably more invest in rural roads than what they create in value. That's because all the urban people want access to the pretty rural places. So even then, they're like, you can still get the win. Because there's too many people out there places. Very good question though.
I was just wondering, you know, like how connected you might be up with some other initiatives like out of the nonprofit world that are kind of doing community development with community builders and that's working in some areas and builders and other ones. It escaped me. So there was another government sponsored one.
Well, our biggest partnership.
Oh, I know it. It was the Just Transition work and things like that. So
On
it
econ.
seems like there's some really interesting work going on in rural spaces right now.
Oh, well, we didn't do a good job. If we made a partnership diagram, it's good. So Just Transitions is a relatively new one in the last 2 years. Colorado Health Foundation has been longstanding. Community builders, I have not maybe.
We haven't been formally connected to community builders. There is a lot of interest very recently in community development in rural Colorado communities, like community belonging in rural Colorado. I'm not quite sure what drove the Colorado interest. But that community builders, was that the Sterling? Or
They've been around a
That's
while. They're based in Colorado.
they might be the ones in the Southwest that we've been trying to connect with. The short story is we're trying to connect with all of those folks. There is going to be a new big Belonging in Colorado initiative that will be led out of Berkeley, but that will be trying to,
Of course, that out of her.
yes, we can talk about that later. Yeah, but they are trying to, there's a lot of funding behind it, and I think that they're going to be trying to do some convening of some of those separate initiatives this summer.
Oh, interesting.
Well, you'll be shocked,
Yeah.
but we had underinvested for quite a while. When I first got here, we had community development far bigger. And one of the budget cuts, it was a topic they decided to mostly cut out entirely extension. We're rebuilding, which is exciting, but we left a big vacuum and some people feel that we also have an EPA brownfield region covering the state that's led out of Kansas State. And we also have another project coming up from Arizona, but we can't be upset about it because we honestly will have to say we weren't doing enough. So what we are trying to do now is show up in those spaces, be good partners and collaborators where possible. I am supporting some of those projects emanating from other universities, but they're now like saying like, we would love to have a more localized partner. There was just no one. And so it's a tricky thing to navigate because they had the right to come fill the space because no one was covering it.
Yeah.
Now we're back, so we're hoping they'll engage us, and that's been variable across groups, but like I'm speaking at the Roundvale Conference for Kansas State in a couple weeks, so that one they actually, please come help us. So it's been very varying, and we're hoping Extension just keeps that investment in rural this time, because the initiative is wrapped. He kind of lightly said the rural initiative wraps up this June. They have decided to integrate and redesign some of our work teams in Extension to integrate those folks, and then they're now going to ask for them about how we would at least continue to give them, because as you saw from the size of the regions, you need a pretty good travel budget, because you're covering, 18 counties. We have that in the rural initiative, and our work teams don't have that. So we're still working on the details, but we're hoping this sticks around, knock on wood. And Willie showed you, we made a pretty good case that we did a lot in 3 years with a good budget, but it wasn't a huge, I'm sure Berkeley's budget has another 1 or 2 zeros at the end of what we got. So really good question. Who's from rural? I just want to know who's from rural. Who's worked with rural?
I'm from rural Louisiana, which I don't bring up in these spaces.
That's about as rural gets.
Of the rural community projects that have been done, It seems that like ripple effects are like the main goal of those. Are there any types of projects where you see like more ripple effects than other types of projects, or not in the thing yet?
What? Rural Initiative is only 3 years old, so ripples take a while. I would say that's why I love that Patty featured FLTI. I have to tell you, I worked in the organization and I'd heard about it. I was too simplistic in my head. I was like, oh, that's cute, like moms and grandmas getting together with the kids, and, you know, I thought it had a 4-H flavor. Then when you see what they're actually doing in terms of getting people brave enough to run for school boards and city councils and stuff, you're like, that is a ripple effect, because it's not only that person gaining confidence, it's that person getting a managerial position in the community. All of the kids and people who look like them, seeing someone in that role in that community. And that's why I think they just now have started to do what would be research to show, and those communities are actually showing that's paying off in graduation rates, suicide rates going down. There is no bigger ripple effect, but you have to be around for 10 years, and they're 15 now for that to happen. We had dismantled this, so that's the thing. We're just hoping they invest with us long enough we can actually say that, because we'll be around long enough. But some of the economic development stuff, we could tell you the investments we've made in state parks. We didn't know COVID was gonna happen, but they kept people's sanity, like during 2 years where everything else was locked down. So yeah, in other spaces, I was saying community economic development, we're too young to this, except for FLTI. And that's why we're mimicking FLTI's principles.
And one of the hopefully one of the commonalities you saw across our presentation is really this flip from like, we're coming in and telling communities what to do, which has really been the traditional model for kind of academic to community relationships. And instead saying like, let's work with you to help you develop your capacity and tackle the projects that you think are interesting. So just flipping that model on the head is already like focusing civic capacity as one of our desired outcomes, instead of saying like, we're going to run this project for you, but when we leave, good luck, right? And not having kind of the resources, the knowledge, the expertise to actually do it within community. So really those ground up engagement partnerships, which I'll say CSU is really working to become a leader in that space specifically, kind of across disciplines. Those are really the places that we expect to see those ripple effects come out. Did you have something like that?
Great question.
Yeah,
We probably have time for 1 or 2 more.
well, I was just gonna be praised, but now I have a question. First of all, the praise, I mean, this is such important work and great work, and you're really at the front lines of sort of democratic and civic capacity building. I just think all of it is wonderful. But the slide about the ready work on wolf reduction, let me throw a question, like, are there plans or are there?
Oh, please ask me about that. 'Cause that's a fun topic.
It's a fascinating topic in and of itself, and it creates some new potential conflicts and divisions that we haven't had to speak a long time. But also it's a cross county issue because the wolves aren't gonna pay attention. And so, is there?
I just having fun watching her chase it. Yeah.
I know.
Exactly. And this is the perfect rural issue. A bunch of highly dense population, urban counties who are the least likely to see wolves ever voted in something. Now, what's better than most states is when they voted it in, they also gave it the budget. So to cover any livestock loss by those producers, that at least the economic losses in theory are covered. So at least if you're gonna be in an urban area, telling a rural area, you have to let this stuff happen. Cover the cost of that. I think what people underestimated was the cost beyond economics, which I'm not as good at, but those discussions led to of what else it may impact in those communities that you can't cover with writing a big check, which the urban areas can. So I think that is probably, that's why I included it as an example, and I didn't lead it, my colleague, and several people led that, is that you have urban areas making some decisions that are very impactful for rural areas right now. And what we're not good at yet is having whole statewide conversations. There's also a slaughter ban being proposed in Denver County this year. I gotta sign the white paper on that. It'll be up here at some point in time. But again, that might not affect rural areas because it's only for one county, but it's the spillover effect of, will any other processing plant put any money on the ground in Colorado if even one county closes that down? It's only gonna raise cost of food in a state where we're already having food security problems. So no one ever has bad intentions, no one ever. They think but they say, well, particularly we'll cover it if you guys lose animals. Well, those are the ripple effects that are negative. We're trying to, so what we might be doing better is mitigating negative ripple effects from people doing things, not thinking empathetically about the communities they're gonna be impacting. But that one's still ongoing and there's community conversations. There's now a special person all they do for the Colorado Department of Agriculture is host conversations about wolves. That is their full-time job. They've got to have a fun life, I figure at this point in time. But I agree, it was a bright place for us to be on that issue, the great partnership with the College of Natural Resources. But it's hard because we're also not supposed to be political, right? I didn't say anything there that said, wow, you should have felt about that. I just said, what you have to remember to think about holistically, which people don't do always.
So does anyone else have a question? Because I already asked one, so, but if not, no, but we do have to leave this room in just a few minutes.
Well, does anyone need a passport or a sticker saying you're proud to be Democratic? We are giving those out as well. I just felt we were supposed to be doing lots of more holistic things. Was this what people expected? And we're not going away. So if you heard anything today where you want more information how to connect with one of these or reach into these efforts, we are 3 of the people, we know how to find Patty, like within seconds. So thank you for coming and
I want to give a really quick shout out to Jonathan Cable, who snuck in the back, who's one of our grad students in ag, works with Extension, been working with the Center for Public Deliberation, but has been really fundamental in making RAP happen across the state and doing a lot of these other projects. You'll see he's one of the authors on the Reddit report, so.
and spent every day at National Western on accessible education. There's nothing Jonathan doesn't do. He's probably pieces I hear. Yeah. Thanks for coming, Jonathan.
Thank you.
So the reason I got off is when I went online because I was just an invitee. I couldn't see the chat.
I couldn't either, yeah.
So we
Oh,
had no
I'm so
access.
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's
What's
okay.
your name?
Melissa, I'm with the Kate's Family Foundation.
No.
So I'm here.
I know your predecessor. I just haven't known you.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we would love to partner with you. That's why we're asking about partnerships. So
Yeah.
I'll let you talk.